you ever wondered how to navigate as women professors in academia?
Everybody has a unique journey, a unique story with defining moments, struggles, and joys along their journeys.
We are here to celebrate each journey where we can share our stories, insights, and inspirations. I am Thasarat
And I am Cat. This is WPO,
Women Professors of Ophthalmology,
Journey into Academia. Hi, I'm Kat.
Welcome to the WPO Women Professor of Ophthalmology Journey into Academia. Today, we have the privilege of interviewing two distinguished professors who not only excel and successful in their respective fields, but also share a deep commitment to supporting women's mentorship and fostering diversity.
These remarkable women professors have dedicated their careers to breaking barriers and empowering the next generation of ophthalmologists and women in science.
Our first guest is Dr. Lynn K. She is Professor Emerita of Ophthalmology at the Stein Eye Institute and was the inaugural Senior Associate Dean for Equity and Diversity Inclusion at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. Dr. Gordon is also an active clinician scientist. Dr. Gordon has held multiple leadership positions, including being a current member of the board of the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society, past president of the California Academy of Eye Physicians and Surgeons, and also past president of WPO Women in Ophthalmology.
And our next guest is also Dr. Sandra Kazahn Masur. She's a professor of ophthalmology and of pharmacological sciences and the founding and current director of its Office for Women's Careers at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. She has been principal investigator for numerous NIH-funded studies on the cell biology of membrane transport and corneal wound healing for 35 years. Thank you both for spending your time with us today.
Andy, can you tell us a little bit about your story, a journey into academia, particularly, the ones that helped you shape your perspective and approach to the field?
I guess I'm going to start first. Thanks so much for inviting us to be part of this, and we're very, very honored. When I was young, I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. That didn't work out. And then I discovered science, and throughout my undergraduate career, I was going to be a scientist. I went to graduate school and did my PhD in early molecular biology before there was PCR and all the new techniques that everybody uses. I guess that's now an old technique. And I discovered that I really liked sort of working with people. And I was in a cancer institute, and I decided that I really wanted to be on the medical side as well as on the research side, and went to medical school, knowing that I was going to be an oncologist until I discovered ophthalmology. Ophthalmology is such a great field. And going into it and then discovering neuro-ophthalmology, which was my field of final choice, was just a culmination of my interest in science, in medicine, and taking care of patients, and in continuing research. I sort of fell back into academia and had many mentors along the way that were supportive and helped contribute to my academic success. I wound up staying at UCLA, where I had done my residency and fellowship training, and then joined the faculty, mainly because I wanted to continue my research, and I wanted to participate in the mentoring of young trainees. During those years, I had to sort of relearn science again. I'd been out of it for enough years that I really didn't know the current lingo, and again, had mentors who helped me and supported me making that transition into academia. In academia, I was lucky enough to have collaborators and other individuals that, again, created a network of support that allowed me to flourish. And I loved doing science and medicine and teaching trainees. And then I discovered what I really loved was the mentoring side and the issue of equity and diversity, and ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to achieve what their passion is. And so I segued a bit into the dean's role, where I was Senior Associate Dean of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, while I was still taking care of patients and running a lab. And that combination of work was incredibly fulfilling.
Well, it's wonderful listening to Lynn, because one of the things that I think emerges as you listen to other women and their career paths is how we each come with a passion, and then we find the right way to amplify it, to enrich it, to share it with others, and then find another path. And so there's nothing that's direct in our careers. There's not that academic ladder we was shown. There's more of a lattice, like a spider web. And we move this way and that, and we eventually get to a goal that's very fulfilling. So my story is, of course, then different than Lynn's. I always was torn between science and art. Growing up, couldn't decide which way to go. Growing up in New York City, you have the specialized high schools that help you move on in adolescence. And since I knew no women scientists, but I did know one woman artist, I chose, rather than go to Bronx High School Science, I chose to go to the High School of Music and Art. And that was just a spectacular experience for me, because as everybody knows, adolescence is hell, especially as each of us found out we were very different in some way. And each of us really learned to respect that kind of diversity. And as Lynn was talking about the importance of diversity, probably we were probably the only specialized high school in New York that had entrance requirements for academics as well as either art or music. We had a very diverse group of students. And so I went to school with people from every background. And that was spectacular. Coming out of high school, again, what was I going to do? And I ended up I did a dual major in art history and in biology. And so kept moving along that way, taking all the courses in both and deciding that, well, I'll probably go to graduate school. So I get to the end of my college career, and which graduate school? Am I going to do art history or am I going to do biology? Well, I knew women who'd gone on to get their PhDs in art history. And the ones I knew were working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Great. In the gift shop. That's what was open to women at that time.
Wow.
Whereas the women who'd gone on in biology, they didn't have their own labs. They were research associates but they were doing their science and they were publishing. So it was a no-brainer. And as Lynn said, important people along in your life. There was a dean of math and science who, when I went to him in terms of what should I do for my next stage, he told me that the bio department hired one graduate each year just to work alongside the professors. We didn't have any graduate students to help out in the lab or to teach an additional lecture. And so I went and they said, yep, we'd be delighted to hire you. So I had a year of working alongside my professors in a most amazing environment in terms of teaching and learning, and just committed myself at that point totally to a career that I thought would be science, doing some research, but especially teaching. However, again, you plan, but things change. So finished my doctorate, took a position back in my own college in a tenure track, and then decided I was going to have my first child. And how was I going to do that? And my husband at the time was a physician who was setting up a practice, and there was no way he could be a real co-parent on this. I had to take the primary responsibility. So thinking forward, I said, well, I want to stay with the science. I want to stay with academia, but how can I do this? And I said, okay, how about if I work 3 days a week and I'm home 4 days a week? That'll be a good balance. And so I went to my chair and I said, this is what I plan to do. And he said, oh, fine, you can stay. And I said, no, Steve, they won't be happy. My colleagues will be very unhappy. Everybody else is here 5 days a week. This is unfair. And besides which, I will never get back in the science if what I'm doing is teaching 3 days a week for the next 4 or 5 years. So I said, I'm going to go looking around New York City. This is an amazingly rich environment, and I can find a lab that would be happy to take me. I already have publications in first-ranked journals. I have good skills, and I'll work for you 3 days a week. Just pay me enough to cover my babysitting and travel costs. So I went around New York, and all of the lab heads, honestly, were all men. And they were very welcoming and said to me, my wife is so happy staying at home. And this was uniformly, she has a degree in this or that. It's so fulfilling. Until I got to one person, and that was a man who was at Memorial Sloan Kettering. And he said to me, I'd love to take you in my lab. This is perfect, but I'm going on sabbatical. So Mount Sinai is starting a medical school, and there's a chairman there of physiology and biophysics whose research overlaps with yours. Why don't you go talk to him? So I went up to Mount Sinai, and I met with Irving Schwartz, he was dean of the graduate school, and he was also chair of physiology and biophysics. And I explained to him what I wanted to do. And he said, that's excellent. If I do not hire you, my wife will divorce me. Which was a very pleasant change from the earlier responses. His wife was a woman named Felice Schwartz, who established an organization that still exists called Catalyst. And they really do mentoring for women who are in business, who are trying to juggle family and their careers. And she had envisioned what I wanted to do, ended up, in fact, writing an editorial for the New York Times about the mommy track. And I was really the pilot experiment in the mommy track. So Irving hired me, but what he did, and I think this is something that has informed me and what I've done since then, he hired me 3 days a week. My pay was pitiful. I went back from assistant professor to instructor, but he also hired a technician for me full-time, which meant that my days in the lab were golden. I could really plan the experiments, do the experiments, follow up. I was doing a lot of electron microscopy, so that could be prepared in between the experiment and my going to the scope. And it was just phenomenal. So when I had the second child and then was ready to come back to work full time, I applied for my first R01. I got that, and I got a Research Career Development Award, and I was off and running. So that's a very different path than had I not met the various people along the way who really did make a difference to me. And as a result, I built my career at Mount Sinai, but I was able to, within the environment there, switch research areas as well. As you mentioned, my initial research was on membrane transport, and that overlapped with a field that was very much nephrology, which is very male physician dominated, and I was tolerated rather than welcomed. And a colleague who had similar research interests was in the Department of Ophthalmology. And he said, Sandy, why don't you think of doing research in a well-funded tissue as opposed to fighting this battle? And I said to Mario, I don't see what I would be interested in the eye. He said, we will have lunch 1 day a week, and I will walk you through the eye, which he did. We started at the back, and we moved to the front. And when we got to the cornea, I said, this is great. I've really been interested in cell matrix interaction. Where could I do that better than in an area that's not vascularized? And this puts me in a very different field. And as a cell biologist, what this did was to put me into close contact with a group of people who were working mainly in cancer. This group was all cell biologists, and they were women. And suddenly I was welcomed, and people would, come to a poster and say, well, I have an antibody that I think might really make a difference for this question? Or would you like to come in my lab for a couple of months and learn how we're doing such and such? Or would you like me to read your grant? Totally different. And so, yes, I moved into ophthalmology, but I also took advantage of a matrix of cell biologists who were just very generous.
But I think what you're talking about is a lot of things that I experienced. I think a lot of things that all of us experienced. In one lecture, I likened my career to a pinball, that old-fashioned pinball, where you pull the lever back and you just see where that ball goes, and how fast you pull what lever depends on where the ball winds up, whether it's a phenomenal prize or not. And I think what you're talking about is taking opportunity, and we don't have a map when we start out of where we're going to finish. At least I didn't, you didn't. I think most people don't. We think when we're young, we know exactly what we're going to do. But as you look at across a career, when you get to the end of your career and look back, you realize how many doors opened and you took that opportunity. And you also think about some of the doors that opened and you didn't.
Yeah.
And your career is made of making those choices and segueing.
Yeah, I was really impressed listening to both of you, and I didn't realize you both traveled from such a different background, and then you're here in, ophthalmology and research in such a very convoluted way and very exciting way. But similar to you, I was thinking of a game, but I was thinking of like a video game or something where you're going and you hit the barrier, and you either break through the barrier or you kind of bounce in a different direction and kind of go a different route. And also what Sandy was saying was like a spider web, but I think, like you said, the common theme is we have barriers, whatever we do, we find that new opportunities are unexpected, they arise, they lead us to different ways. And probably the important thing is you're not giving up, you're continuing to kind of go in those different directions without being afraid. And then just you make these amazing connections that get you eventually to something you love. The other thing I also heard between the two of you were that you're following your passion and, you're doing multiple things at once sometimes, things that you don't expect. Like Lynn, you were doing 3 different careers at the same time. And then Sandy's got a child and doing all these things. But women are adaptable. I mean, we're very adaptable and we're good at that. And that's a strength. And I think what you both showed us is you create a new balance that works. So that's fantastic.
I'd like to quote a friend who's now Professor Emerita at Stanford, who headed their first women's center, who is an economist. And her name is Myra Strober. And she talks about juggling and how you're always juggling in your career. And she said, and you learn to recognize which of the things you're juggling can bounce and which, if it drops, will break. And so you really learn not only how to juggle, but really where to put your priorities and your concerns. And I think you're right. Women need to learn how to juggle, but they also need to be extremely creative and to look at an opportunity for what it means to them and not allow other people to define it for them.
Yeah, that's certainly well said. And also similarity that I heard from both of your stories are mentorship, like early mentorship, collaboration. Those can be quite transformative in the career. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
And there's positive mentorship, and there's those experiences that are not positive that allow you to say, well, I don't believe them. They're not right, even though they're in positions of power and leadership, and saying, in your heart what you're able to do. So you have to find a different path or a different person to help guide you along that path.
That actually leads very well into our next question for the both of you. And you both touched on them already a little bit, but as very prominent female professors in ophthalmology, what are some of the very unique challenges you faced in your career that you particularly remember, and how did you overcome them? Sandy, you can go first.
Oh no, I want Lynn to go first.
You both have touched on it already. So
yeah, you did, yeah.
It's very interesting because obviously we've had challenges. I tend to underplay the challenges, and as Lynn was saying, learn from it. And what I remember is my workaround, how I then use that as a springboard for the next thing. So I will say that there have been times that, for example, one of the roles I played was I was Dean for Faculty Development, and this grew out of my leadership for a women faculty group. And it turned out we were doing all this mentoring, putting up posters around campus with flowers on the posters saying women faculty group, and the topics would be how to write a grant and how to get promoted and all this. And the room was filled half with men. So the dean decided, well, we need an office for faculty development, and asked me to take it over. And I did that for about 10 years. And then a new dean came along. And that new dean decided that he wanted a different person in that role. And so in order to get me to gracefully exit, said, well, what would you like to do instead? And that's when I started the Office for Women's Careers. So it became an opportunity to really to take advantage of, yes, I was being asked to step aside, but this was a totally new initiative, and I was able to build things within that, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. So
Learning here, Sandy, that you don't take no for an answer. Like when you went earlier on and went to different labs and people there, and you're like, you keep going. That's great. That's what we want to tell everybody.
It is, yep, that's probably pretty accurate. Some of my family might find that an accurate portrayal, and now they understand what they've had to deal with.
It's a strength. What about you, Lynn?
I'm going to talk about something from early in my career. I mean, I think there have been challenges throughout at every level of the career. Absolutely. But I finished my PhD before I went to medical school. And so I was a little bit older than most of my colleagues. And I was married when I started medical school. And I wanted to have a family. And I didn't think about sexism, implicit bias at that time. We all knew it existed. There wasn't a name for it, but I didn't really think about it much because I really thought, I'm good, I'm solid, people are going to recognize it, no problem. And that's not exactly how the world works. And so I had a baby during medical school. And this baby was 2 weeks old at my first interview for residency. I went out to get a new suit the day before. It was several sizes bigger than my usual. And trying to juggle that, having a baby, being on that interview trail, I encountered really overt sexism. This was a long time ago. That baby is now going to be 40 at his next birthday. So, but I hear that these same things are still happening, where I was asked, are you married? I didn't wear my wedding rings to the interviews, but I wasn't going to lie. And so anything they asked me, I wasn't going to lie. And I remember someone asking me, how I could be a good housewife and a doctor. That I can still hear that person. I can still visualize where I was sitting when I was asked that question. And those sort of hurts and pains will sometimes dissuade people from going forward. And I talked a little bit earlier about those people that you encounter that are negative, provide negative energy. Well, that was certainly it. Well, during my residency, I had my second baby. I was the first resident to have a baby at the Stein Eye Institute. There was a female fellow who had had a baby before me, but not a resident. And I encountered some there was some subliminal issues during that, but I will never forget, I was due the week after OCAPS, and my chair, Brad Stratzma, giant in medicine, one of my heroes, one of my mentors, saw me the week before the OCAPS, looked at my size and said, Lynn, I don't think you need to sit for a several-hour test next week. And so it's those challenges, but also those kindnesses and those recognitions. Now, they didn't give me much time off to have the baby. Remember, this is still many decades ago. I got 2 weeks off that I could put with some vacation. But there was this push and pull of having children during training. And I know there are many women that don't have partners. There are women that do have partners. There are women with same-sex partners or women with partners of a different sex or gender. And whatever your lifestyle is, whatever your love is, whatever your family situation is, whatever your responsibilities to nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters, parents, aunts and uncles are, there's a way to work it out, but you will encounter roadblocks and you will encounter those naysayers who are saying, you're not doing a good job, or how can you do this and do that? And you just need to smile back at them and say, trust me, I'm capable, and go forward and you'll be successful. But it's sometimes not easy.
Certainly.
I'd
Yes,
like to pick up on a thread of that Lynn just began in terms of caregiving and its impact on the workforce in STEM. I'm now on a committee from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine that is spending 16 months looking at this issue to come out hopefully with a report that will make a difference for everyone in terms of the topic is caregiving and its impact on the diversity of the STEM community, because typically it is the women who take on responsibilities, whether it's for childcare or relative care or elder care. And also, especially when you're first generation from a minority, underrepresented minority group, you are called upon by your family when there are issues. And where do we turn for the kind of support? So I throw this out to you now, because if you know of any programs in your institutions or elsewhere that do this well, please give me information on that, because we are building the case for where we can improve things. And for example, Biden's chip legislation has within it that any company that gets supported by the chip money has to have daycare on site available for the workers. Yes, so we need to address this. Yeah.
well, those are certainly challenges, and thanks to both of you for breaking some of these barriers, for us, for the people who come after you. And now we're going to switch gear a little bit into something a little bit more fun. So what aspect did you enjoy the most about being in academia?
The people locally and the people nationally and the people internationally. Being in academia may not provide you with the salary of being in private practice if you're a physician, but it will provide you with so much opportunity to learn, to grow, to experience other cultures, other countries, and to gain friends in many places across the world. For me, it is great to have written papers and to have gotten grants, but it's really about the people. And then not only about the colleagues across the world, but the trainees. It's those students that succeed. It's those students that you can help them in their own struggles when they reach their own roadblocks, to get across them. And it's that dichotomy of being able to put your hand or every part of your body to lift up others, and then also gain this network, which is incredibly rich.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's wonderful to hear. It's certainly important with the networking, supporting each other, and making friends, right? I heard that through WPO, actually the two of you became friends from two different parts of the country. Yeah.
Yes.
Right? We didn't know each other before.
No, and as you can hear, there are parallels, but very different versions of the story. And it turns out two of our sons have also had parallel paths in terms of our older and our second son. So that is, I think, probably unprecedented, but very interesting. I'm sorry, there was a motorcyclist going by when you asked your question. What was it exactly?
Yeah, so the question was, what part of academia that you enjoy the most?
Oh, I think the fact that there's so much there. I mean, within academia, there are so many different roles you can play. Even, had I stayed in a college or a university, there'd be one range. Being in a private medical school has meant a totally different group of options, but they've been wonderful. And especially, as Lynn points out, we have the opportunity to reach to others and incorporate them and mentor them and bring them in. At Sinai, we do an awful lot in terms of reaching out into the community. And we're in a very diverse community with many people who've never had the opportunity to consider going into medicine or science. And so that's one of the things we do an awful lot of outreach into elementary schools and high schools and try to engage the kids in as many ways as possible and showing them the range of opportunities within medicine. So it's just been an incredibly rich opportunity. And for me as a basic scientist, yes, my work is translational, but I've also really learned to respect the contributions of my colleagues and the depth of their commitment to caring for other people and for taking what is the best in basic science to bring it and to help the much larger community. So it's, I think, been really privileged, and again, unintentionally. There was no way I wanted to end up being a professor in a medical school. That was not one of the options that I ever considered, but it's an extraordinary opportunity.
As both of you said, it's really amazing when we can help other people and they achieve and they surpass us even. That to me is just amazing. And I think really kind of makes us feel like we've been a part of their lives and given them opportunities that maybe we didn't have when we were struggling through this in the beginning. And I also like kind of what you said too about just getting them involved early on, because a lot of them don't know they can do this. They've never had the experience. They don't have families and friends in medicine or science. And so when you just expose them and tell them they can do it, it makes them think, right? It makes their brain say, hey, you know what? Maybe I should think about this. And that's opening more doors for them. So that's wonderful. For our fourth question here, sorry to talk to you guys so much here, but for those rising women in our field that wonder if pursuing a strong research career is also possible, like the both of you, what would you tell them early on to help guide them? Like, how can they make this transition or get this started without sacrificing other things that they enjoy doing? Ooh, tough question. Should we tell jokes, Tara? I mean, you both have done this, right? I mean, you both kind of started your research career kind of,
but that's
while you're doing other things. And, Lynn, you had mentioned you were actually hadn't done it for a while. So it was actually hard to kind of get back into it in a way. So, there are a lot of women who feel like they want to do this, but they feel like they have to sometimes give up that love or, or interest of theirs. So how can they juggle all these, as you mentioned?
So I think what's really important and I'm going to talk about bench research, because bench research is different than other types of research, right? I love clinical research. I think it's amazing. And I love epidemiology. It's phenomenal. And I'm not making hierarchy out of this, but all I know, because that's what I did, was I went back into bench science. And having the dedicated time to do it is critical. You can't do it nights and weekends without having some time during the week. And so when you're negotiating your career, you need to make sure that you're resourced enough to be successful. And that means negotiating with the chair for time and for space. It may be that you need to take a cut in your salary to be able to do that, because NIH caps on salary is lower than clinical salary. And so you need to understand that you're not going to be paid as a retinal surgeon necessarily while you're in the lab doing bench science, but there are other benefits of doing the science. And so I think you need the time, you need the resources and support, and then you need to have people around you who know more than you do about what you're trying to start, so that they can provide the feedback. Sandy talked about reading grants. You need to have other people read your grants.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have other people read your promotion material when you go up for promotion. You can't do this in a silo all alone. And so you need to have networks of people to help provide the feedback to you that what you're trying to accomplish is feasible. You need to take bite-sized pieces. As my husband was one of my greatest mentors throughout my career, also a physician scientist. And he used to tell me, Lynn, you don't always need a home run, you need a base hit, And he's not really a big baseball fan, although one of our grandsons is a passionate baseball fan. But, and I do have 3 children. I talked about 2, I don't want to leave the third out, who is the only one who became a doctor. But what you need to do is you need to figure out those building blocks. It's like a Lego set that will allow you to build on the next thing, to get to the next level, to write the papers and to write the grants. You can't do research without money. You can't do research without time. And so putting all of those pieces together is important when you're starting out. And sometimes it means giving up some things as well.
Wow, those are all great tips.
So I can talk from the vantage point of the bench scientist who's a basic scientist. So I don't have to worry about the NIH cap, because there's no way that my salary will be intruded upon by that. So that's a different, so look at your colleagues who are in your department who are basic scientists. They're working from a different base. But the other thing that I was going to point out here is I totally agree with Lynn about what you need to negotiate for. You need to have the time, you need to have the resources. And there are also things that will support you. For example, if you did what Lynn did in terms of not being involved with science and now getting back into science, there are re-entry grants from the NIH, whereby if you are returning to science, you can go into the lab of someone else who still has 2 years left on their NIH, and you get your funding from NIH to get up to speed. And I think it's a 2 or 3 year grant. And that's tremendous help when you are making that route, and you may want to do that after medical school. For example, if you've done an MD, PhD, it may be necessary to even come back that way. The other thing is the Doris Duke Foundation has supported something that we also had started at Sinai that we called the Distinguished Scholar Award. And that is to give someone who's newly juggling caregiving and their career $50,000 to spend any way they want for a year, in usually for people to substitute for them so they can go home at 5, because in fact the lab doesn't end at 5, but you still may need to pick up that child from daycare, or somebody to help you write the grants, or so you can use it in lots of different ways. So there is more and more an acknowledgement of the challenge of trying to do this, and there are funding resources that people should become very aware of.
And there's also small little grants that are often there at your local institution. That's how I started out, was getting teeny tiny grants.
Yeah, certainly having adequate and enough supportive environment is really a key to an early in the career, or even later, right? You say the re-entry grant. And also some of the institutions have K-12, NIH also have a K-23, K-08. Take advantage of those. I thought that would be all these wonderful tips. Thank you so much.
And I wonder if you two would be willing to talk to anybody, if any of our young, upcoming researcher scientists are interested. They might say, how do I get, maybe we can connect them with you and they can get some wonderful advice, because we can't get it all here in this podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Kat?
There's a question that you didn't ask, that in terms of a memorable story from the journey. And I did want to add this because I think it's quite relevant to how my career ended up being enriched in ophthalmology. And it's a very time-dependent story. In terms of the program that you mentioned that I headed, that I was co-director of at the Marine Biology Lab from the National Eye Institute, that was established by David Papermaster in about 1998. David is a superb scientist, and he built it on the people he knew who were already at NIH who were involved in vision research. And it was, to a man, all men. The faculty was superb, and there was not a woman or no one who was not your classic white male. And they were excellent. But the NIH realized, or the NEI realized, that this was not the group they wanted there. They wanted to have a more diverse group, and it also was being reflected in the students, that the students who were coming through looked like the faculty. So I got taken away from a cell biology meeting, which was happening in Washington, and taken over to Bethesda to meet with the Kupfer. He called me in, he said, we need you to help David Papermaster running this course. Now, can you imagine that David Papermaster thought he needed help or wanted any? No. But they decided that in order to continue to support the course, they needed me to be the co-director. And then again, the sexism of the time, this head of the NEI said to me, and you'll have to dress differently when you're at Woods Hole. Was he going to send me a Land's End catalog? I don't know. But it was a very interesting comment. So the first year that I was now co-director, I realized this was going to be very challenging. And so I said to David, I am so thrilled to be here. Your work is beautiful. This course is amazing. I'm new in eye research. Can I just sit in this year as a student and really learn the most I can? And, then we can talk about how to design it the following year. And that's what I did. We became really close friends. We redesigned it. He said, well, you can now recruit half of the faculties. I recruited women, I recruited people from minority groups. Then the students that we got were highly diverse as well. And ironically, and sadly, that summer that I was supposed to be there now, really functioning as co-director, the following iteration of the course, he introduced me as the sister he had never had. Which says how much we became a real team. And the NEI said it was the most effective training program they had. in terms of the number of people who went on to get RO1s within the Institute. So I benefited tremendously, but I think we also really made a difference in the way that Lynn is talking about as well, in terms of making the definition of a vision scientist one that has many different facets and different versions.
Certainly, and another story that you turned the opportunity, to become a positive ones. So that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Can I know the time is late, but I wanted to share one thing because I think it's important and it's something that we didn't touch on also from that same question. I'm an introvert and I'm very shy, and I know some people may not recognize that, but I am. And I was, invited to an early WIO summer meeting in Aspen, and I wasn't going to go. I was new to academia, was only there for a few years, very insecure, very shy, didn't want to go, had all these children at home, but I went. And that was a pivotal moment for me in my career. There were probably only about 40 people that attended the meeting in those days. And I met some incredible mentors there. And that taught me the value of showing up and volunteering. And that led me, you mentioned that I had been past president, yes, but not before I had done a lot of other things in the organization, in the state society in California, in the American Academy of Ophthalmology. I wound up becoming council chair of that body several years ago and was able to be on the board of trustees for 4 years because of that position. And it really is about showing up and volunteering and doing the work well, which we all will do when we're asked to. Even if you're an introvert, even if you feel awkward about speaking on webinars or speaking in front of people, show up, volunteer. And again, it provides you with so much breadth of knowledge and experience and opportunity.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think you hit it. Being an introvert also very difficult, and you overcome that, and helping to encourage others also coming out from their shell as well. So showing up and doing a great work, and then just like you become a president of many different things. Thank you. And Kat, now it's time for our 2020 Hindsight Pearls tips.
Okay, we got our pearls on to listen to your tips here. So for the both of you, obviously you're both amazing women. We could go on forever. But let's learn about you kind of as just people here. So for your tip for today, how do you stay sane? What do you like to do?
One thing that relaxes you in the, after the tough days, the tough week.
I can tell you that for me, at various points of my life, it's always been that I have something outside that anchors me in the world that isn't science. And this is the beauty also of living in New York. And I suspect the same thing is true for Lynn in LA. Who you are is not defined solely by what your day job is. At one point, we were looking at jobs in Iowa City, and it was very clear to me that was not true. In Iowa City, it was you were a professor, and that's who you would always be. And in New York, it's quite different. So when my children were small, I was very involved in community action because we chose to live in a community that was integrated, and real estate agents were constantly working against us in terms of trying to turn it into a single race community that would have excluded us, in fact. So that took quite a bit of time, but it gave me anchors, it gave me relationships with people outside of science and academia, and kept me grounded and let me know what my children were also facing. Nowadays, my kids are gone, and yes, I do a lot of stuff with them distant, but that's not part of my life. And so I've gone back to some degree to the art, in that I'm a docent at a local museum, one of the art museums here, the Museum of Arts and Design. And 2 weekends a month, I give a docent tour of whatever the current exhibitions are. And it brings me into a very different world. I interact with people I would never meet otherwise. And it makes me learn about new things that, again, wouldn't be part of my life otherwise.
Well, for me, it's a couple of things. It's community. So whether it's taking walks with girlfriends and getting iced coffee, or it is taking hikes in the mountains. It used to be scuba diving. Now it's snorkeling, not scuba diving. I like to be outside. I love that I live in California because I get to be outside most days. I like to walk, I like to hike, I like to garden, I like to grow vegetables, I like to cook, and I like to be with my kids and grandkids and friends. I mean, I think it's the things that we all love to do, but that would be the side of things that I love the most.
They're lucky they have warmer weather, Tesseret, than we have. I love to be outside, but unfortunately in the Midwest, not always the case. Today it's beautiful, but tomorrow it could snow. But yes, and that's both of you saying basically is to still enjoy other parts of who you are, to be more balanced and to enjoy life. I think that keeps us all energized, really.
Right. And it's hard, when you're a busy clinician and you have patients that have terrible problems and they need you, and your children need you, or your friends need you. It's hard to create the right balance. And so maintaining flexibility, hiring people to do tasks that you don't necessarily need to do.
Yeah.
To be able to focus and give your attention to the priorities that you need to. And there are times that you need to be with those patients.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be doing your career because they count on you. And in those moments, they are the most important aspects of your life. But when they're tucked in, when they're settled down, when they have had the conversation with you that they've needed to have, don't spend the rest of the time cleaning unless you love to scrub floors. Spend the rest of the time doing those valuable activities that bring you joy and give you back the energy to face the next day.
And the concept of balance is over a lifetime. It doesn't happen each day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we live a very long time, luckily. So you don't have to get everything done that one day. Yeah.
But the point well said that we do need to make sure we take care of ourselves too, as busy as we are. So you guys have been wonderful examples of that, but really just great discussion today from both of you. I learned a lot, Tesseret.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And no, thank you so much. It's so wonderful having both of you, and you sharing your stories, your tips and advice, and so we really are grateful.
And we're grateful for you. It's wonderful for us to see what your generation is doing. I mean, you've got your own challenges. They're different than the ones we face. Some of them, unfortunately, are still the ones we faced. But it's just been superb to have the opportunity to see what is available to you and how rich your resources are and how talented you all are. So thank you for what you're doing.
Right. You each have already succeeded as being full professors and amazing clinicians and amazing individuals. And we're grateful for the opportunity to hear from people that are a bit older than most of the individuals in the WPO.
Well, thank you very much to both of you again. We've really appreciated your time. We're excited to hear more, and we will, I guess, see everyone again for our next podcast.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful summer too.
You too. Bye.